US President Donald Trump at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and that big takeaway, he may have said that he will not use force when it comes to Greenland, but he did indicate that the United States is building the biggest warship and that they have a huge defense budget and that they're the only ones who can protect Greenland, and that Denmark failed. And then he went all the way back to the Second World War when President Trump said Denmark couldn't hold Greenland or defend itself from Germany even for 6 hours. And then the US had to come and hold the line. He, of course, conceded that it was stupid to have left Greenland then after defending it for so long. The fact that the Americans had close to a dozen military bases at the height of Cold War. But he says, I want Greenland. Psychologically, America has to have Greenland to defend Greenland. And he said it's not for rare earth minerals. He said it is for security, for America's national security, for the security of the northern hemisphere. And he's made it very clear that there would be troops that will have to be deployed. And why? He needs the title. He needs ownership of Greenland. Many takeaways on the state of the American economy, where he said from dead economy to the hottest economy in 1 year. Just yesterday, it's been 1 year since Donald Trump's inauguration, 20th January 2025 to 20th January 2026. He's called it the most dramatic turnaround in US history. He did say tariffs have reduced trade deficit, inflation is at an all-time low, didn't raise taxes, and that $1 trillion were added to savings and retirement amounts. He said 1.2 million people had been pulled out of poverty and dependence on food stamps. He called the United States the economic engine of the world. He told Europe, you're going up or down with us. He also said US borders are now impenetrable, and that's where he launched a frontal attack on Europe. On Europe's open borders, mass migration. He said Europe is not moving forward in the right direction. He spoke of the attack on Venezuela, and he said next 6 months, Venezuela will make more money than it did in the past 20 years. He spoke of gas prices coming down to about $2 a gallon, numbers that were unheard of since his first administration. He spoke of energy, how nuclear energy is coming back. He said USA is leading China in artificial intelligence. He hit out at the green energy, which he called a scam in Europe. He said windmills are a scam that radical left even tried to impose on United States. He spoke of Germany that generates 22% less energy now than it did in 2017. Electricity prices are 67% higher, and many other aspects. But it's on Greenland, where he did spend a lot of time, where he said that he insisted that he wants very close ties with Europe. But he said everyone must remember Denmark wasn't able to protect their territory except USA. No power in Europe can defend Greenland. Denmark fell to Germany in just 6 hours. I want you to listen in to what President Donald Trump said on Germany. I'll bring in our guest. We'll talk about it in greater detail. But he described Greenland as that big, beautiful piece of ice. He said he saved Greenland, prevented the enemy from gaining foothold. Now he says it's his right to have Greenland. Otherwise, he said Europe would have been speaking either German or Japanese. He said they were stupid to give it back, but how ungrateful are people if they're denying him Greenland? Listen in.
We want strong allies, not seriously weakened ones. We want Europe to be strong. Ultimately, these are matters of national security, and perhaps no current issue makes the situation more clear than what's currently going on with Greenland. Would you like me to say a few words of Greenland? I was going to leave it out of the speech, but I think I would have been reviewed very negatively. I have tremendous respect for both the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark, tremendous respect. But every NATO ally has an obligation to be able to defend their own territory. And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States. We're a great power. much greater than people even understand. I think they found that out 2 weeks ago in Venezuela. We saw this in World War II when Denmark fell to Germany after just 6 hours of fighting and was totally unable to defend either itself or Greenland. So the United States was then compelled, we did it, we felt an obligation to do it, to send our own forces to hold the Greenland territory. And hold it we did, at great cost and expense. They didn't have a chance of getting on it, and they tried. Denmark knows that. We literally set up bases on Greenland for Denmark. We fought for Denmark. We weren't fighting for anyone else. We were fighting to save it for Denmark. Big, beautiful piece of ice. It's hard to call it land. It's a big piece of ice. But we saved Greenland and successfully prevented our enemies from gaining a foothold in our hemisphere. So we did it for ourselves also. And then after the war, which we won it big. Without us, right now you'd all be speaking German and a little Japanese, perhaps. After the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that? But we did it. But we gave it back. But how ungrateful are they now? So now our country and the world face much greater risks than it did ever before because of missiles, because of nuclear, because of weapons of warfare that I can't even talk about. 2 weeks ago, they saw weapons that nobody ever heard of. They weren't able to fire one shot at us. They said, what happened? Everything was discombobulated. They said, we've got them in our sights. Press the trigger, and nothing happened. No anti-aircraft missiles went up. There was one that went up about 30 feet and crashed down right next to the people that sent it. They said, what the hell is going on? Those defensive systems were made by Russia and by China. So they're going to go back to the drawing boards, I guess. Greenland is a vast, almost entirely uninhabited and undeveloped territory that's sitting undefended in a key strategic location between the United States, Russia, and China. That's exactly where it is, right smack in the middle. Wasn't important nearly when we gave it back. You know, when we gave it back, it wasn't the same as it is now. It's not important for any other reason, you know, everyone talks about the minerals. There's so many places. There's no rare earth, no such thing as rare earth. There's rare processing, but there's so much rare earth.
So let's try and decode what President Trump said. Joining me on this broadcast is a panel of former top diplomats from the US and the UK. My colleagues Geeta Mohan and Rohit also join me on this broadcast. We have Cormac Smith, former British diplomat and a special advisor to then Foreign Minister of Ukraine, joining us. Daniel Fried is a former diplomat and a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council, joining us on this broadcast. Cormac Smith, by hook or by crook, is that your impression that Trump will take Greenland, or if he says he will not use force, he'll negotiate for control of Greenland, title included?
Hello. Donald Trump will try to take Greenland. Donald Trump will take what he is allowed to take. The governing factor here is how strong European and other NATO allies stand against Trump. It must be pointed out, one, America never possessed Greenland. They did not come enter the Second World War because of Greenland or what was happening in Europe. Everybody knows that America entered the Second World War because they were attacked by Japan in Pearl Harbor, and Japan was an ally of Nazi Germany. So Mr. Trump needs to learn his history. But second, what I want to say is, since 1951, there has been an agreement which has allowed America unfettered military access to Greenland. I believe America at one stage during the Cold War had 17 military bases. If they wanted to reoccupy those bases and even build more bases, they would have the full cooperation of the Kingdom of Denmark as a NATO ally. Mr. Trump seems to have been trying to diminish the importance of rare earth metals. It is now much easier to drill for rare earth metals or mine for them in Greenland because something Donald Trump denies the globe
Sure,
is becoming
sure.
warmer.
But for a moment, I want to
So
stay. I'll
there
come
is
to rare
no
earth materials and
right.
minerals in just a moment.
If
But
I can finish my point, there is
yes,
absolutely no reason for Donald Trump to own or to take Greenland by force.
and
The
yet he
theory which
wants
is
to.
growing
Yet
is
he wants to. And that is what I
He
want to
wants to be the
understand why.
American president. He wants to be the American president in history who has enlarged the United States by the largest amount. He wants to go
Okay.
down in history for that. This is an old style colonial robbery.
Is that all that he intends to do, Daniel Fry? The manner in which Europe appears to be pushing back. But if Donald Trump continues to push ahead, and he doesn't want to just build more bases, he wants control, he wants the title of Greenland. Do you think US will push through all the way despite the pushback by Europe?
The best line in President Trump's unfortunate Davos speech was his taking force off the table. He said the US will not use force to acquire Greenland. That was the best line of the speech, and really just about the only good line. Trump made no coherent case whatsoever for the US demand for Greenland. His history is bad. All America's security interests in Greenland and the Arctic can be met using the existing framework. And Trump did suggest that the United States' commitment to NATO and its support for Ukraine is somehow dependent on acquiring Greenland. He didn't say so directly, but I took that from the way he juxtaposed the Ukraine issue and the Greenland issue. Basically, Trump was saying to Europe, if you want our help in NATO and for Ukraine, you need to give us Greenland. I'm not sure that Europe will take that deal.
You're
I
not
don't
sure
think
Europe will take that deal. However,
I
that was a major part of what he said. And Geeta, my apologies. I'm quickly bringing in all our guests on the Greenland aspect of this. While he did say that he will not use force, he also implicitly spoke of that massive $1.5 trillion defense budget or war budget and the big warships that US is building. Was there a threat there?
Well, more than threat, Gaurav, I'm looking at it as leverage. Because for now, United States of America still continues to be the net security provider for most countries, and therefore the leverage. That's the military strength that President Trump was projecting, and a reality check in terms of what the U.S. administration, what Trump administration really wants, wherein, like Ambassador Fried said, that there is the biggest statement that came was that he's not going to use force in Greenland, but he also added that no island or no area or territory can be defended if it's on lease, which
Yes.
is not just about Greenland. It's also about Diego Garcia. It's about Chagos Islands. So we're looking at a lot of places where America is willing to risk a lot only to ensure that the territory is held and not given away.
So it's not just the Western Hemisphere that he's talking about, Rohit. Is that the impression that you also got? Geeta says it's also Diego Garcia and the Chagos Island, but on the Western Hemisphere, is he very clear by hook or by crook? He has to have Greenland, and he wants. Does he believe? And you've been speaking to officers and officials in the administration. Sooner than later, there will be a split in Europe. Europe will not be united, and he will have Greenland title and all, as he said.
Well, I think, the administration has made it pretty clear that securing Western Hemisphere is a priority for President Trump. This is not the first time he's talked about Greenland. He's talked about it years ago, in fact, in his first term as well. I think he does see, and there is a sense that after what occurred in Venezuela. I think President Trump wants to take Greenland, and he wants to do it by being nice. And as he said, we'll not take it by force, but we'll remember if you don't give it to us. So there has to be some way. I think he has possibly is going to be meeting up with some European leaders after this and discussing this. But he wanted to lay it out for everybody in the world to understand where he's coming from. He pointed out facts that NATO, America hasn't been able to get best of NATO in terms of what it puts in. He has said multiple times over the last few days that NATO would not come and save us. So I think he's trying to urge the European leaders to look at his point of view and understand, make them understand if Greenland in fact becomes a U.S. territory, nobody, I mean, in the sense Russia and China would not attack it, unlike they did in the case of Ukraine.
As a former British diplomat, Cormac Smith, your reading of Europe, we heard what Finland said, and Finland said Europe can defend Greenland. They can defend themselves even without the United States. Do you think that's possible, or that's tough talk, but not tough action that could follow?
Absolutely. I think that Europe can defend itself if it is united without the United States. Let me make 2 points. One, just side point before I start on Europe would not come to America's aid. The only time in history that Article 5 of the NATO Charter was triggered, that is the article that says an attack on one is an attack on all. The only time Article 5 has been triggered was when the World Trade Towers were attacked, and other NATO members triggered it and came to the aid of America. So again, Mr. Trump is wrong on his history. But secondly, if I can just say, NATO has become a lot stronger in recent years with the joining of Finland and with the joining of Sweden. If there is to be, and if Trump decides to seize Greenland, that will be the end of NATO, but we will be looking at a NATO 2.0 or a coalition of the willing. And that would be a force which would include the new members of Finland and Sweden, but also the most potent army on the European continent at the moment, man for man, which is the Ukrainian army, hardened by 12 years of fighting against Russia. If I can give you some figures, if a united Europe, and if we take Canada into it, we're talking about over 600 million people. Why do 600 million people need 350 million Americans to defend them from 140 million Russians who can't even beat 40 million Ukrainians? So yes, and we have an economy in Europe which is over 10 times the size. So yes, Europe can defend itself if we come together, if we stay united, and Donald Trump wants to divide Europe. If we stay united, we can defend ourselves.
Daniel Fried, can Europe defend itself? Because these are very strong words. They may have numbers, economy, but weapons and systems predominantly come from the United States of America. That's the impression, that there is no Europe fighting any country minus United States of America. Is that what President Trump may be banking on?
Well, Cormac Smith is right that Europe can do a lot more to defend itself. It has the economic capacity. It does not yet have the arms industry. And for many years to come, it will still be dependent on the United States. However, Cormac Smith's larger point is correct. Europe needs to do more to defend itself. I've been listening to Europeans for 30 years saying that Europe needed to do more, and now Trump is going to force them to do more. At the other side of whatever it is we're going through, the best outcome would be a renewed transatlantic partnership with Europe, a more equal and capable partner. That would actually be a good thing. Now, Trump's way of going about it is destructive. But as we think about the future, we need to think about a partnership with Europe, which is getting away from the post-1945 European dependency on the United States. There's a particular problem for the Germans, who have wanted to rest under the US umbrella for various, let us say
Since
politely,
the Second
good
World War.
historical reasons. Sure.
Yes.
But in the meantime, the damage can be severe, and Ukraine is going to depend on the US as well as Europe. So I hope
Absolutely.
that the
And that's the
damage is
point.
not going to be so
That's
immediate.
the point I want to come to. And stay with me, gentlemen. Rohit, stay with me. As our guest, I want you to listen into US President Donald Trump specifically on the point of Ukraine and peace. And he spoke of the number of soldiers who were being killed on the battlefield every month. If it was 27,000 this month, 26,000 the previous month, 31,000 the month before. And the numbers have been stacking up, sadly, for 4 years and counting. Listen into President Trump.
I inherited a terrible, terrible situation. If you look, the border was open, the inflation was raging, everything was bad with the United States when I came into office. But I also inherited a mess with Ukraine and Russia, something that would have never happened. And I know Putin very well. He and I would discuss Ukraine. It was the apple of his eye, but he wasn't going to do anything. I said, Vladimir, you're not doing it. He would never have done it. It was terrible what happened. I could see it happening, too. After I left, I could see it happening. Biden had given Ukraine and NATO $350 billion, a staggering sum, $350 billion. I came in, and just like the southern border, just like inflation, just like our economy, I said, wow, this place is in trouble, meaning our country. All of these things were out of control. And I've been a critic of NATO for many years. And yet I've done more to help NATO than any other president by far, than any other person. You wouldn't have NATO if I didn't get involved in my first term. The war with Ukraine is an example. We are thousands of miles away, separated by a giant ocean. It's a war that should have never started, and it wouldn't have started if the 2020 U.S. presidential election weren't rigged. It was a rigged election. Everybody now knows that. They found out. People will soon be prosecuted for what they did. It's probably breaking news, but it should be. It was a rigged election. Can't have rigged elections. You need strong borders, strong elections, and ideally a good press. I always say it. Strong borders, strong elections, free, fair elections, and a fair media. The media is terrible. It's very crooked. It's very biased, terrible. But someday it'll straighten out because it's losing all credibility. Think of it. When I went in a landslide, a giant landslide, won all 7 swing states, won the popular vote, won everything, and I only get negative press. That means that it has no credibility. And if they're going to get credibility, they're going to have to be fair. So you need a fair press.
And our man in Davos, Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today, now joins me on this special broadcast. Siddharth, you were listening to President Trump at Davos. What's the feedback? You get the impression that he's sending across that message, Europe has to give him Greenland title and all. Everything depends on that.
Gaurav, I think the best way to understand this speech, and like you described it earlier, everyone was listening in word by word. It is a reiteration of Donald Trump's agenda that he has been pursuing on a 360-degree basis ever since he took office once again as the President of the United States. I would say that every single pain point, and this speech was more focused on geopolitics, strategy, NATO, and so many other elements. Every single one of them is a reiteration. There is one silver lining, if one could put it that way. And I noticed that that was the sense that we got from some of the attendees, which is that there was no explicit mention of taking Greenland by force. Of course, there seems to have been a sort of mix-up with Iceland, but assuming that it was only about Greenland and Iceland is not now in the center of Trump's gun sights, it's clear that he's saying not by force. Does it assuage European leaders? Does it assuage those people, including the Danes, who virtually boycotted this in protest against Trump's announcements? We don't know that. That response is playing out in real time. But the criticism of NATO, the issues with clean energy, calling out Europe, and frankly, Gaurav, everybody from industry that you can speak with, and mostly off the record, and some leading lights go on record to say that Europe is a textbook example of overregulation. Innovation, research and development has been stifled, and President Trump taking pot shots at that. He, of course, brought in Somalia as well. But let's leave that for a side. But it's clear that the Trumpian world order was on full display here at a gathering of the global elite that had turned out in full numbers to listen to him, Gaurav.
Indeed. Stay with me. So let me bring in, Cormac Smith once again. The criticism of NATO. That, words to the effect when he said, we've got nothing out of NATO. We paid for NATO 100%. All I want is title and ownership. Can't defend on lease. Psychologically, we need ownership. Is he telling NATO that you have nothing except me?
Donald Trump is lying on an industrial scale. As I have already said, the only time that NATO triggered Article 5 was after the 9/11 attacks on New York, when other NATO members came to America's aid. That's the first thing. Donald Trump, again, lies when he talks about 350 billion given to Ukraine. The figure that has been audited is closer to a third of that, about 120 or 130 billion. So
this discussion clearly will continue.
If I can finish,
okay.
Of Donald Trump, but the one positive thing that has come out of Donald Trump's election to the White House is he has forced us European leaders to stand up and spend more on defense, because we have spent far too little on defense.
I have run out of time, gentlemen, on this part of the show.